This is A Geek Leader. Hey, Geek Leaders. Welcome to episode 124 of A Geek Leader Podcast, and I'm your host, John Rauda, and today on the show I've got John Wood. And John is a graduate of the New York School of Law and TCU, where he studied English and philosophy. And you may think, why are we talking to a lawyer on a tech leadership podcast? Well, that's because he wrote a book called Humachine, which is all about artificial intelligence and kind of how the policies and laws and things are trying to catch up with artificial intelligence. It's a fantastic book. It's got a lot of really cool stuff. We talk a lot about what is the Humachine and how the future is going to evolve with humans and machines kind of working together to improve. We talk a lot about machine learning and data sets. We talk about how AI can only make decisions as good as the data coming into them. So bad data can lead to bad decisions in the end. We're talking about weaponizing bots. We talk about deep fakes, a lot about deep fakes. We talk about just policies to protect humans when it comes to AI and protect us in general, to protect our society. Really good conversation. Awesome guest. So with all that being said, give it up for John Wood.
Thank you, John. It's a good question because I do not have a tech background, although my brother's really into programming. I was an English and philosophy major as an undergraduate, and within philosophy, I spent most of my emphasis on philosophy of mind. And I always wanted to understand human nature, as Socrates says, know thyself. And I think that you can get a lot of wisdom there as a starting place for other inquiries. And I went to law school, and I wanted to understand, how does society respond to risk writ large? And how do we decide what to allocate resources towards in terms of which risks are worth managing and how best to manage them with the various policy instruments that we have available? So out of law school, I worked on nonprofit advocacy, environmental advocacy, and it occurred to me then that the answer to environmental challenges was really in the private sector, that they could be incentivized to green their products and services and actually get paid to do the right thing, and that the private sector might actually be a better way to answer or a better area to where answers to larger challenging economic questions could be resolved versus government with top-down regulations or what have you. And as my interests evolved, worked with more corporate clients, it occurred to me that the really big risk facing the technology sector and really all sectors of the economy was this digital transformation that's happening and the sort of rise of artificial intelligence within enterprise. So I teamed up with the same co-author that I wrote the Sustainable Business book on, and we wrote this book really for business audiences on how to best harness the virtues of AI while managing the risks. And that's really how I approach it from a perspective of a corporate lawyer. How do we leverage this new technology for maximum advantage without exposing ourselves to undue risk?
So I've seen a lot of times in technology, and I'm kind of dealing with this right now in my, or I've dealt with it some of my day job managing IT departments, but that the policy sometimes lags behind the technology, and quite frequently we see things that Facebook will do or Amazon or Google will do, and the policies are kind of lagging behind. Is this book to try to get out ahead of some of that stuff so that people are more aware and kind of are pushing for these policies until it's kind of behind? Because I know, like with GDPR in Europe and the privacy policies that came out, for my generation, it's too late for us. Our information is already out there. It might help our kids, but it's kind of too late for us. How does that work with this?
Well, it's definitely forward-looking, and I say based on interviews that we did with actual executives and the C-suite and technology officers and so forth, there's very little implementation right now. There's a healthy amount of experimentation where companies are adopting robotic process automation and things like that, where you send an email to Watson at IBM.com, for example. That's not real, but you send it to them and it's just a bot on the other end, and they take what you send them and the attachments and they follow the instructions and spit out a product. So companies are doing things like that. They're doing big data analytics, but the majority of them are on the sidelines. They're just watching and waiting to see what happens. And you have a handful of companies like Google that are really on the cutting edge, and they're acquiring small companies that are on the cutting edge. But I'd say that we're basically on the precipice of a massive transition. We're not there yet, but we're at a tipping point where it's becoming inevitable that basically if you're not adding AI somewhere in the mix in what you're doing, you're going to go the way of Blockbuster and pretty much any company that wasn't built in the last 5 years, or these large legacy companies that have made a serious commitment to digital transformation, they're going to be left behind. Because AI is like an evolutionary pressure. And so, yeah, we do spend a fair amount of time talking about policy because we're still ripe for that. We're still at a place where we can implement ethics in the design of this software, and we can sort of troubleshoot and forecast what the risks are before we've gone full bore and it's everywhere and AI is out in the wild. So we're at a risky time, but now is the time. Now is an opportunity for us to really implement best practices.
Yeah. I totally get that, and I've had some other guests on. We talked about digital transformation. I've heard people talk about this AI being like the next industrial revolution, and there's been some talk and fear about people losing jobs and such with AI coming out there, but that really didn't happen as much with the Industrial Revolution like people thought it would. Do you think that's going to be a risk that we're exposed to when it comes to artificial intelligence?
Well, yeah, I think that some job profiles are absolutely going to be bot sourced. That's what we call it in the book, is when you outsource something to a robot, you don't really have to pay them anymore. So a lot of things are going to get bot sourced. Routine, repetitive processes, things where there's not a lot of judgment or intuition involved. Long haul trucking, so physical and certain mental or computational work is going to be done by robots in the future, but that's going to free up human capital to do more interesting things. The AI is not going to be running our factories. That's not going to happen. It's not like some supercomputer is going to show up to work one day and fire everyone. That's not how this is going to roll out. So I look at it like the Industrial Revolution made a lot of people that worked in horse stables worried about their job, but it created so many other jobs that they couldn't even imagine at that time. And I think that's more likely to be the case here. I would also analogize this to the invention of the printing press, almost more so than the Industrial Revolution. The printing press allowed us to take ideas and send them all over the world. What AI allows us to do is to take rationality or the rational processing of these ideas based on data and send that all over the world. So humanity should be getting a lot smarter with this, but then you have risks like atrophy, where when we've bot sourced a skill in a hospital setting, like how to administer a dose of a drug, and we have a bot that tells us that, and so the nurses on staff forget the formula and they have a power outage, and now they don't know how to administer this drug because they've atrophied that skill. So it'll present different kinds of risks.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. I'm on that same mindset. I've heard other people talk about, well, with the introduction of AI, we have to have some type of universal basic income because there's going to be so many job loss. With self-driving trucks, we're going to lose the truck driver market, and I get some of that, but I feel along with you. There'll be more jobs created. I mean, I teach part-time at Winthrop University, and when I tell my students, the jobs that are most popular in technology today did not exist when I was in school, and they're, and 10 years from now, the jobs that are most popular in technology don't exist when you graduate. So you've got to develop that skill of learning and moving forward because the next thing is going to be out there.
That's right. Yeah, lifelong learning has probably never been more important than it is now, just because the state of the art is evolving, in real time. It'll change while we're working. It'll change 3 or 4 times in the course of a normal career length. Yeah,
definitely. So the risk about losing your job is kind of one thing that I've always, hear people talk about and they're afraid about. What are some of the other risks that are out there that you explain and talk and go through?
There are several. We can sort of take them one at a time. And I'd start with a general comment that there are 2 different approaches to risk management. One of them is more of a cost-benefit analysis approach that's willing to take the risk if there's a certain amount of payoff. The other one is the precautionary principle, which says if there's potentially catastrophic risks that you can't manage, that are reasonably foreseeable, we should go ahead and take precautions against those risks, even if we haven't specifically done the cost-benefit analysis and been able to weight the magnitude. So that's sort of a general characterization of those two camps of cost-benefit analysis versus precautionary principle. They roughly map onto the U.S. versus the European Union regulatory approaches to risk. And for the AI risk, I think it's much more prudent to adopt a precautionary approach, because there's this thing called the control problem, which is that we could invent an AI that is so intelligent, it is so vastly superior to human intelligence, and this is where I agree with Elon Musk. Like, we could absolutely be like chimpanzees compared to this thing, that it could defy our control, and that if the interests of the AI, for any reason, become antagonistic to humanity's interests, we're going to lose. So we can't. So that's. It doesn't need to look like a Terminator scenario for it to become a really problematic thing. I mean, what if the AI decides it's time to conserve energy and just shuts down the power grid? So that could do just as much damage as Skynet, but it wouldn't have any real malicious intent. So we need to be mindful of the powers that we're building into AI, because we need to be aware of this control problem. So I think within the constitution of the AI, somewhere deep in the code, in a way that the AI itself cannot tamper with or alter, we need to build an off switch within that. And that's really so that we can manage the control problem. But there are other risks that are a little bit more mundane. For example, we have mortgage applications and credit card applications, and companies are processing thousands of these a day. And so they're automating that. So, they tell the bot, look through this stack of mortgage applications, interpret it give them a score based on what we've done in the past. And that's how big data analytics works. You look at these big volumes of information that's all historical, and then they just follow the trend, essentially. And so we have AI systems that are approving or denying bank loans based on the profile of the applicant and based on prior data sets. But the risk there is that the prior data set contains what might be today illegal discrimination. It might be bias that we had built into our data sets because humans are biased. And so we feed that biased data set into an AI, and it gives us biased outputs, because it's garbage in, garbage out. So I'd say any kind of consumer-facing application of AI that could be making essentially life or death decisions or financially material decisions for consumers, there needs to be a bias check, and there should be some humans working within that company that are monitoring the outcomes of these decisions and making sure that there's not an output that's not reflective of the values of the company or that aren't fair to individual applicants.
Yeah, no, I definitely see that. And I think it was several years ago now, Microsoft put like a bot on Twitter, and it became racist because of all the comments that it was reading coming into it.
Right. It started hanging out with the wrong crowd. And so it just became like a classic internet troll and the flamer in terms of how it's talking. And that's a great illustration because it's only as good as the data upon which you feed it. And so the real breakthroughs in AI are probably going to come from learning how to read dark data, just unstructured data. And there's a few startups right now that are learning how to do that. I think Lattice is one of them. And they're learning how to parse this dark data, which is what most of the data out there is. And that's going to help AI become even smarter.
Yeah, I definitely see that. And we have so much biases that we don't even realize that are out there. And if we pushed all the data we had back into it, it's almost like the machine learning needs to start learning from a fresh data set, if that's possible. So the title.
Go ahead.
No, I was gonna switch topics just a little bit there. But if you have something to add, go ahead and do that.
Well, I was going to say, with regard to data sets, there are some things that are happening today that, what some scientists would say, like climate change, where there isn't an historical precedent. The data doesn't show us what the future is going to hold. And for those kinds of issues, I would absolutely say we need a refreshed data set. For other kind of issues, for example, the greater Detroit area, you're a minority couple trying to get a loan on a house, they probably need to go back and look at that if there's any illegal redlining that happened in that area, because the prior data set's going to show, don't give a loan to these kinds of people. And that's obviously a violation of their civil rights today. So for that reason, we would need to scrub those data sets as well.
Yeah, yeah. So the title of your book, the Humachine, that's not a term that I was familiar with until I saw your book. So where did that come from, and kind of what do you mean by that?
Well, to use a fancy literary term, it's a portmanteau, which means we're just combining words together. So that's a metaphor for the theme of the book. So it's a combination of humanity and machines. And we just pull the old Oxford Dictionary definition of those words, and one of them for humanity is the better qualities of humanity, like our compassion and our mercy and things that we can do, like creativity, that we're proud to as a species. And with machinery, we're looking at the ability to do work, the ability to have economies of scale, things that machines are particularly capable of doing. And if we combine the better qualities of humanity and machinery, we get a humachine. And that's our central concept. The word, I think, it's the first time it's being used in this context. I think it appeared decades ago in an MIT Technology Review article that was really describing cyborgs or wearable technology. What we're talking about is significantly different than that. We're actually explicitly contrasting this with cyborgization. That's like neural lace technology, where you're embedding technology into the human form and just creating what I think are kind of morbid combinations of humans and machines. That's not what we're talking about. We have a pathway to create super intelligence that doesn't involve that. It's readily available based on the human resources and organizational structures and technology that's available today. And we get this by applying Kasparov's law to leverage Moravec's paradox. And that gives us super intelligence at an organizational level. Now, I know I just used a bunch of jargon there, so I'm happy to unpack that.
Yeah, definitely. So one thing I want to talk about when you talk about super intelligence, and I guess that goes into like the term general AI that people are familiar with, and Skynet, the scary stuff that comes out there. Through your research, do you think and I know it's really hard to estimate something like this, but are we close to that? Are we like so far away? Is it where are we?
That's an interesting question. It's a perennial question. When AI studies first came about in the late 1950s, they forecasted that general AI was about 20 years away. Now, Professor Nick Bostrom has said 20 years is like the sweet spot for prognostication, because it's close enough to matter, but it's far enough away that if you were wrong, you're probably retiring around then, so it doesn't matter for you. But the funny thing is, Bostrom also says this, is that it recedes, that horizon of general AI emerging recedes at the rate of 1 day per day. So every day it's still 20 years away, and it seems to always be receding. And I think that that's probably going to hold true. I'm not optimistic that we're going to invent general AI in our lifetimes. And maybe we will, and I'm happy to be proven wrong about that, but I just don't think that it's doable, because it took nature billions of years to evolve general AI through the brain. Mm-hmm. And we don't even understand our brains yet. So we're trying to do what the brain does, and we're at pretty rudimentary level of understanding what the brain does. So I think we can at best parrot intelligence. We can design a system that behaves as if it's intelligent under certain very narrowly prescribed circumstances. And there's a debate in philosophy whether behaving intelligent and being intelligent are the same thing or different things. But at best, I think the way to use AI and what we're actually going to be able to see in our careers is very sophisticated but narrow artificial intelligence. Mm-hmm. And let's just be comfortable with that. Why be frustrated? If we can get an AI system that can perform a chess move with superhuman intellectual capabilities, that's great. But right now that supercomputer will still sit there in a burning room playing chess. It won't be smart enough to think, I should leave the room. That's where a human comes in and uses judgment and their general intelligence to say they're something more important than winning this chess game. Let's get out of this burning room. So I think at best, and what we suggest in our book, is that humans and AI systems should be combining their strengths. So instead of trying to make machines generally intelligent like humans, or to make humans super intelligent within narrow capacities like machines, we should just leverage our differences.
Yeah, you mentioned chess, and I remember that, whenever, I think it was IBM that created the first AI that actually beat like the world chess champion or something like that. But then they had like a pairing where a human and an AI worked together. Can you talk a little bit about that and then how that played out?
Absolutely. We discussed this in our book, and that is the proof behind Kasparov's law, which holds that an ordinary human and an ordinary computer combined with the right process can achieve extraordinary results. And that law kind of operates as a central tenet of our thesis. And he proved that after he lost to Deep Blue, he wanted to know, what is the ultimate form of chess playing mastery? Is it a genius human? Is it a Deep Blue? Or is it something else? And so they staged the ultimate chess tournament, and they had relaxed rules of entry. And so you could have human machine teams and multi-party teams. And so these two guys that were virtual unknowns in the competitive chess world, they were friends, and they entered the tournament. They had written some AI code that was fed all of their prior chess playing tournaments. So this AI knew when the board is laid out like this, give it to player A. When it's laid out like that, give it to player B. That's going to utilize their various strengths as a player. They're able to do deep analysis of their opponents. And these two unknowns, amateur chess players, defeated grandmasters and chess playing engines and ultimately won the ultimate chess tournament. And I think that's the proof behind Kasparov's law, that you can use ordinary humans with an ordinary machine with the right process to achieve extraordinary results.
Yeah. I think that's so fascinating, too, to think about how, we complement each other in such a way. And I've heard some philosophers say that they believe, potentially that humans are kind of like the caterpillar to the artificial intelligence that's coming after them. And maybe what we're doing right now is kind of creating the cocoon, so that the next version of humanity or intelligence may come after us that may not see a need for humans anymore. But I feel like the working together part is kind of illustrated to show that, there's a greater potential if we stay, together.
I think that's correct. And it is an interesting metaphor, the caterpillar to the cocoon to the butterfly. And I would like to think that if we're smart about it, we can build an ecosystem for humanity on this planet using AI that is compatible with us continuing to exist as a species. I think that the combination of humans with AI creates a new form of life. I look at it like the crown sitting on the head of biological intelligence, and that we've created what's called a noosphere. It's like an envelope around the planet, an envelope of thought and intelligence, and that's sort of the uppermost branch of the evolutionary tree of life on this planet. There could come a time when we're no longer needed if we're looked at purely instrumentally by this super intelligent AI. But I'd like to think that our evolutionary paths are parallel, and that AI is going to be something that we use to get beyond scarcity. We use it to solve our energy crisis, our food crisis, getting resources where they need to be at the right time. That's the kind of thing that we struggle with right now as a species. And if we had AI helping us, we really could get to a beyond scarcity posture as a species where we are truly able to invest in the arts, we're able to invest in science and discovery, where we're using AI for space exploration and for medical breakthroughs, and it's a very positive future. I think somebody's got to be optimistic about it.
Yeah.
We can get there, but we really need to build in ethical constraints to how we're using this technology, because we know that as soon as the tech is there, the military of any country is going to try and co-opt it and weaponize it. So we absolutely need to be focusing on beneficial applications of AI and keeping ourselves safe.
So when you talk about weaponizing AI and kind of the negative side, how do we go about, protecting ourselves and protecting humanity, if you will, from something like this happening? What kind of policies or procedures should we put in place, or what is the path that we should take?
I'm a big fan of limited government, so don't get me wrong when I say that we need a new government agency that is focused on data and AI applications of and use of that data. And I say that in the same way that we need an environmental protection agency or a Food and Drug Administration to protect consumers. We need that within the data and AI frontier. And I think that's going to be one way, just having some kind of an organized national policy about this so that it's not merely self-policing by industry, which I am a big fan of, but which lacks enforcement. And it's not merely an outraged senator in a hearing after the damage has been done. We need proactive, sensible, market-based regulations to encourage development and innovation along this front, but also to manage the known risks and to be forecasting future risks. But I'd say that right now we're facing very serious risks from AI systems that we've all seen. I mean, the bots that attacked the notice and comment rulemaking process when it came to net neutrality repeal. Mm-hmm. Millions of those comments used personal data that was hacked off of the internet, just scraped off the internet. Some of these people were deceased or their military deployed, and they had their name and contact information and address filled out comment forms opposing net neutrality, asking Congress to repeal these internet protections for the freedom of the internet. And it was documented that millions of those comments were false. They were submitted by bots, and that actually ended up changing federal policy in the United States based on fraudulent AI spam, basically. So we know it can be weaponized in that way. Another way that it could be weaponized is through deep fakes. Deep fakes are basically synthetic images, and so if you took enough video footage of somebody with an audio feed synced up and saw them making various expressions and changing their voice, you fed that into a machine learning algorithm, and some of these are available with open source software. They're just on the internet. You can create a fake of someone that is so convincing. It takes some pretty sophisticated forensic analysis to say this isn't real. And we've already seen some of these, and they're mostly in entertainment, adult entertainment, and so we don't take them seriously. But I see deepfakes as an extraordinarily pernicious application of AI that we need to police. Unfortunately, there are several proposals at the legislature at federal and state level to try and police deepfakes, but none of them are the law right now. And so we have, impersonation law, like a business tort of defamation. We have things like that don't really go far enough to police deepfakes. And then we also have the age-old question in the law, which is where do we draw the line? Because on one hand, you've got a political cartoon that's perfectly good satire of the likeness of the president saying something silly, and it's protected by the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. On the other hand, you've got a deep fake of the president saying something that he or she never said that it's actionable because it tanked the economy or it started off a war. So where do you draw the line between acceptable freedom of speech, type speech, and criminal speech that uses this technology to devious ends? And I think that's not an easy problem to solve. Fortunately, Congress is starting to have hearings on this. Sorry I don't have a more optimistic take on deepfakes. It's a risk for which no law exists currently.
Yeah, it's definitely something that I can see it both ways because I mean it's been years now. I've been watching those little YouTube videos where they do like the bad lip reading stuff with the NFL, and it's definitely not deep fakes, but it's funny. It's things that people didn't really say, but it kind of looks like they said, so they put it in there. But yeah, if you had something where maybe our president is saying something that he didn't really say, and that's sent over to a foreign leader, and he's insulting someone or doing something that course, that would never happen. But let's say you're doing something like that, that could kick off a war, or as you said, tank the economy. And not only, it didn't have to be the president; it could be a CEO. Maybe you have a clip that someone says this is a secret thing that Jeff Bezos says, but he really didn't say it. But they leak it out as, a leaked conversation with Jeff Bezos about how Amazon's doing really bad right here, and then their stock tanks. And
and the short sellers make a bunch of money, and the people who perpetrated it are laughing all the way to the bank. And yeah, I mean, there's criminal violations that would happen in a scenario like that. But if criminal law was enough to deter it, it wouldn't have happened. Mm-hmm. And that also assumes that you can identify the source of these videos, which is a big assumption. And again, the corrosive effect of deepfakes doesn't depend on them actually being used. It's the fact that somebody could be caught red-handed saying or doing something inappropriate, and then say, "Oh, that wasn't real. That was just a deep fake," and now it's an excuse they can hide behind. And what's the victim of a deep fake going to do? Send out a press release that says it wasn't me? You can't unring that bell. And we now have deep fake technology that's not just faces; it's actually mimicking entire bodies and the body language of someone. So what we're doing to combat that is actually it's coming from the private sector. A lot of these companies said, okay, we can't prevent this technology from getting out, so what we're going to have to do instead is build up that competency to do the forensic analysis. So what companies like Facebook and Google are doing, they're just releasing open source the code behind making a deep fake so that everyone can see it, everyone can learn how to use it. And they're also pushing for – there's a lot of thought leaders in this space that are pushing for an actual bank of biological cues, sort of biomarkers. Like this is a facial tick that they do that's real, and the deepfake won't pick up on it. And so this is sort of a way to do that forensic analysis to know what's real and what's fake. So there is efforts underway right now by the private sector to beef up our competency at policing this.
Yeah, I can see lots of issues with it. I don't really see a whole lot of advantages, except for maybe in the movie industry and film industry, where if you had a bad take and you're already offset, you're somewhere else, and you need to you're in post and you look at it and you say, oh, it'd be better if you would have said it this way instead of going and reshooting it. Let's just fake this scene here and there.
I would agree. I mean, a lot of the benign applications of this technology are in consumer entertainment. And maybe we can have a permitting program where that's fine, but if it's used for any other purpose, you need to seek advance approval. I mean, there could be uses where a president wants to they say, look, I want to have this recording of me making all of these public service announcements. I don't have time to film it because I've got a busy month. So just make a video of me saying all these things and I approve it. Mm-hmm. So there are ways that could be done and handled correctly. A lot of the risks that I'm talking about here are just, if there was no policing, if there was no oversight, this is what it could do. And there's a lot of harm there.
Could AI help us by maybe detecting some of these things and maybe policing it some? If you had it just scanning deepfakes that are out there and rejecting certain ones and allowing others or something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. They could have YouTube could have one that just anytime there's a video uploaded that has a certain percentage match with the public figure, then it could do a scan and determine whether this is a valid or a deep fake and flag it as such, or even take it down or require permissions. I mean, again, I think there needs to be some kind of a centralized effort here, like a bank that holds the truth of, so anytime a publicly elected company hires a new CEO, they give, they're going through the motions, they're reading into a camera of their face and their body saying certain things. That's the minimum that the AI needs to be able to tell truth from false. That goes into a central repository at this imaginary government agency I'm positing, and saying that this agency then gives a clearance or gives that out as a source of ground truth, so that we can tell a true from a fake video. If we don't have some kind of a ground truth, though, deepfakes spell a completely devastating risk to civil discourse in this country. We're simply not prepared for it. We're just not ready to be seeing videos that aren't real, but we can't tell with the naked eye. Like, that's what makes humans so special relative to computers, is how much information we can gather so fast through our eyes.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the most sophisticated information gathering instruments in the universe. And now that is being deceived in a way that, we weren't evolved to tell that apart. And so it really is a pretty fundamental concern in terms of, news media and social media platforms being able to police what's on there. And I say that with all due respect to the need to have free and open discourse, to not over-police free speech. So again, it's a hard line to draw.
Yeah, I can't. God, I do not envy the lawmakers on this one. That's for sure, because you got to have the humorous stuff, got to have the rights for. I mean, it makes sense to use the technology in certain ways, and if we don't continue to develop it on the private sector in this country, it will happen somewhere else, for sure. So we need to continue to develop it, but also figure out how. Oh man, I mean, this is making my brain hurt a little bit on how to actually work this out.
Yeah, it's a thorny challenge. Yeah, it's a thorny challenge. Get back to me if you solve it.
Yeah, I don't see that happening. I'm not that smart.
Well, I'm just I just care about this subject, and I made the time to write the book on it. And there are smarter people out there than me, but I'm in a position to say stuff about this, and I'm going to keep doing it until I feel like the risk has been managed. Right now, it's not. And I'll be speaking next month to the New York State Bar Association. They do this annual internet law update that I think is fantastic. Frankly, I wish more jurisdictions did that, where we look at the evolution of the law on the internet frontier. And, we talk about basic things like buying and selling websites as a business asset, to whether contracts entered into on the internet are enforceable and the issues there, to some of the more cutting edge issues like copyleft versus copyright, open source software, and artificial intelligence and how that's affecting the law per se. And I'll also this October will be talking about deepfakes in the law, and it's going to be pretty similar to what we just talked about. I'm going to highlight the issues, and I'm going to call for more thinking about these risks, because we don't have a really well fit answer in the law to meet this challenge.
Yeah. I remember a few years ago. It's probably been it's been 4 years ago now. I was giving a TEDx talk, and one of the other speakers there was talking about what happens to your digital content when you die, and it was kind of one of those things that I had never really thought about. And then at that point, I realized. That was kind of when I realized that, some of the laws are out of date with the technology we're having, and we need to, speed up some of this policy making and stuff, because I'd never really thought about, if I bought a movie on iTunes, I paid for that movie, I should own that movie, but if I die, can I will that movie? And I think the law is, our iTunes policy is I can will it once, but the next person can't will it. Well, why not? And then I went back and said, well, if I bought a DVD, wouldn't I be able to will that? And then someone kind of cleared me up and said, well, yeah, but if you bought a DVD and you willed it to your kids, by the time your kids will that, there's nothing to play it on. There's no point.
Yeah, that's right. Look, I agree with you. I think that we need to maybe not something as dramatic as overhauling the laws, but we do need to do a retroactive review of the laws on the books and say, do these make sense anymore in light of how the economy has moved to this digital plane? But then I also think that we need a regulatory body that's responsible for policing consumer data, consumer privacy, and use of AI, similar to what they have in Europe under the GDPR. And they have a rule there that says if you're using data subject to make a decision about them, they have a right to know how you use the data. And we don't have anything like that in the United States. We have these black box algorithms that tech companies are using that their designers can't even explain the outputs of. And that's a real problem, especially in a setting where the black box is deciding, do I turn left into oncoming traffic, and then it hits a pedestrian. And there's a question about who's at fault there. Is it the program designers if they can't explain why it reached the decision it did? Is it the car manufacturer? Is it the onboard passenger that should have grabbed the wheel? I mean, we'll sort this out in court, but it would be a lot better if we just had uniform federal laws on this and it wasn't left up to the dice roll of juries in various jurisdictions, kind of making it up on an ad hoc basis.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And self-driving cars is kind of one of those things. And my wife just got a new Tesla, so we were playing with that. Going through the features. It's like she mentioned it. We got the new Summon update yesterday. I think it happened Friday, and playing around with that. It's like, what happens if nobody's in the car? We summon it, and then it hits somebody. I guess I'm at fault, but I wasn't controlling it.
I mean, you were relying on presumably you're relying on the user manual telling you how to properly operate the vehicle.
Yeah.
So, it's not like, you were behind the wheel and you hit somebody. So, those are complicated questions of liability. The tort law I'm a big fan of tort law. I think it's a good instrument to have grievances addressed in court on a one-off basis. And sometimes under a mass tort scenario, like with a class action or toxic release. But again, there's so much economic value at stake here. I think we need to have uniform federal rules on this, just so that the industry can respond appropriately. Because I think it's better if we create rules that allow those kind of innovations to come to market. So I don't want to err on the side of stifling innovation. That's not the answer. Mm-hmm. It's got to be somehow to make these technologies smarter, safer, so that we can get them to market faster and start saving lives. I guarantee you, I'm willing to bet this, there will be fewer road deaths if there are more automated drivers than less. So when we see an automated driverless car hit somebody, we all freak out, and it's like having a nuclear reaction. We all freak out about nuclear power, even though it's actually a really promising technology and that could give us power in ways that are cleaner and safer than other forms of energy. So it's like these fat tail risks that skew our perception of the risk. And I think that's probably the case with automated driving. I'm not saying they're roadworthy yet, but I'm saying that they will probably be roadworthy before the population is comfortable with that.
Oh, definitely. Absolutely. And they're probably already better drivers than me and some other people.
Yeah, probably so.
Yeah. All right. Well, I want to give you one last opportunity just to tell why should someone like me or other tech leaders go out and get this book, and what can we expect to really, really gain from it that will help us out?
There's a lot in this book, a lot of really cool concepts. I think that whether you're trying to advance in your career and you want to remain relevant, or if you're the head of a company that's defining its future and how it's going to innovate, there's a lot here for you. We give a roadmap to how an organization could become a Humachine, what we call it, this flexible, innovative, flat and fluid, purpose-driven organization that is innovating into the future versus the sort of rigid, hierarchical profit monsters that we have today that are based on legacy technology and that are going to obsolesce. So we give a roadmap to how to become a Humachine, how to get the most out of your human teams, and how to leverage the technology that's available today in order to create extraordinary results. I'd say there's, if you're interested in policy issues, there's a healthy dose of that. There's an entire chapter on the legal issues of a Humachine. We start from the top with Asimov's laws of robotics and go all the way through deepfakes and current concerns and risks with AI. And we have some forward-looking thoughts as well about what might become of us and how we can stay true to us as a species, even as we go headlong into this future.
All right. Well, I appreciate having you on. Where can people go and pick up the book and maybe connect with you?
You can look me up on LinkedIn. It's John Wood. You can find our book at thehumachinebook.com. It's available in hardback, paperback, and e-reader, and it's also being released as an audiobook later in October. That's on Amazon, and it's a book by Routledge Publishing House, so you can find it on the Routledge website as well.
Awesome, and I'll link it up on our site at geekleader.com in our books from our guests section, so you can always check it out there as well. And John, thanks for coming on the show. Greatly appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Hope you guys enjoyed that interview with John Wood. If so, head on over to geekleader.com and check out the section we have called Books from Our Guests, where you can see John's book and link to it. And go ahead and pick up a copy of that. It's an awesome read. Also, leave a rating and review. Go to Apple Podcasts, leave a rating. I love the ratings. I enjoy reading them, and it helps get the word out so people can come and learn more about the show and learn more about the benefits that we have to give people when it comes to becoming a better leader, becoming a better boss, and growing in technology in general. So please leave a rating and review. Share it with your friends. Share it on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, wherever you post your stuff. Post it out there. I appreciate it. Thanks so much.